Well, hello friends, this is Brad Apple. I hope you're all doing well out there, and I want to say thank you for watching the channel. And we're getting a lot of new subscribers that are subscribing to the channel, and I'm getting a lot of positive comments on the videos that we've been doing. So thank you once again for watching. I wanted to talk to you today about Tony Rice, and in particular the two times that I've met Tony Rice. I know lots of people watching this channel are fans of Tony, as I am and have been for many, many years. The first time I got to meet Tony Rice was in 1993. I had been a fan, of course, for years before that, and had been playing the guitar. And of course, Tony was a hero to me, as he is to so many different flat pickers that try to play the guitar. I say try, because it's a difficult thing to do, to flat pick an acoustic guitar, and especially to the level that Tony did. Just really hardly anyone ever gets to that level. Anyway, the year was 1993. I had just graduated high school that May. I was 18 years old, and of course had been a fan of Tony for years before that, and had been playing the acoustic guitar. Started out on the mandolin and eventually picked up the guitar too. And of course, I was inspired heavily by Tony Rice, as so many people are who pick up a steel string acoustic guitar and try to play this music, bluegrass and acoustic music. Tony's an inspiration to so many of us, and it's hard to imagine someone achieving the level of virtuosity that he did. But anyway, back to my story. We made sort of a family vacation out of this. There was going to be a bluegrass festival held in North Carolina, in Linville, North Carolina, at Grandfather Mountain, and it was the Raymond Fairchild Bluegrass Festival in August of 1993. So my mom, dad, my brother, myself, and my grandparents, my grandma and grandpa Apple, they were still living at that time, and they made the trip with us. And it was probably the longest trip I had made up to that point in my life. I think it was 800 miles or so from our house to the festival. So we drove through Tennessee and got into North Carolina and got a room. And the next day we went to the Bluegrass Festival there at Grandfather Mountain. I remember some of the other bands on the bill were of course, Raymond Fairchild and his band, and I think Third Time Out was playing. The Nashville Bluegrass Band, I got to see them there. And of course, the main ones I was wanting to see was Tony Rice and his band, because at that time his band consisted of, in addition to Tony, Wyatt, his brother, Ricky and Ronnie Simpkins, who I had been huge fans of because they were in another band before joining Tony called the Virginia Squires, and I had been a huge fan of them for a long time. So I was just as anxious really to see them and get to meet them as Tony. And Jimmy Goodrow was the mandolin player and tenor singer. So I remember that afternoon. I can't remember, it was afternoon when we we're kind of anticipating Tony. He was fixing to play like in an hour or two, something like that. And I remember me and my dad were walking around trying to find some of those guys, like the Simpkins brothers. And we saw Wyatt Rice and spoke to him. And we asked him, if he knew where Ricky and Ronnie Simpkins was at. And he kind of pointed us a certain direction there, and so we went looking for them, and I first met Ricky Simpkins, I believe, and then his brother Ronnie. And like I say, I'd been huge fans for a long time, and used to order stuff by mail from them when they were in the Virginia Squires and stuff when I was a kid. So I first got to meet them here, and here's a picture of them right here. So I'll get that in focus for you. And this was on August 14th, 1993, according to what I wrote on the back of the picture there. And then at that time too, I was wearing a Tony Rice Unit t-shirt. It's the one many of you are familiar with. It kind of had Tony's logo there, the flat pick, in the shape of a flat pick, and it said the Tony Rice Unit in real fancy lettering and everything. I was wearing one of Tony's t-shirts, and I can't remember the exact chain of events now because this has been 30 years ago, but we ran into a guy there that he saw was wearing a Tony Rice Unit t-shirt. I would say he was a middle-aged fella, maybe late 40s, early 50s. And he saw I was wearing that. And he's like, "Son, do you like Tony Rice?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "Have you ever met him?" And I said, "No." So, me and my dad's still standing there. So he's like, "Well, come on, I know him. I'll introduce you to him." So I was really nervous, and we walked up. There was already people gathered around Tony, best I remember. Tony he had just pulled up. There was like a tent kind of on a hillside there where the musicians would go and kind of warm up and stuff. Tony had pulled his car. It was a white Lincoln Continental, not a town car, but a Lincoln Continental. I would say a late 70s or early 80s model Lincoln Continental car there, pretty big car. And Tony, I guess, had just got there. He was standing outside of his town car, and like I say, people had already gathered up around him, sort of. And this guy, I guess he did know Tony, because Tony seemed to recognize him when he walked up, and they said hello, and he's like, "Tony, I've got a gentleman here I'd like for you to meet. He's a fan of your music, and he said, look at the shirt he's wearing," pointing to my Tony Rice Unit t-shirt. And Tony said, "Yeah, man, he's dedicated," or something like that. And, stuck his hand out. We shook hands. I think my dad might have said hello to him also. I didn't say a whole lot to him. Like I say, there was a lot of people gathered around him, but just shook his hand and told him I loved his music and that sort of thing. But, he seemed really, really kind and nice and generous with his time. And so we wandered on and then watched the show, which was amazing. Tony was already having a lot of vocal problems by that time. I remember his horse was pretty rough that whole weekend. I think we saw him 2 different days there. He was there 2 days, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was an amazing show. I remember Steve Dillon got up at one point and played with the unit. They played the Bela Fleck tune, Whitewater. Got to see Jimmy Goodrow, one of my favorite mandolin players, and it was just a great weekend. I didn't manage to get my picture taken with Tony that weekend. I just didn't want to bother him again. I'd already met him, and I kind of sensed at that particular moment it wasn't a great time to ask him for a picture. Anyway, fast forward 10 years from that time to 2003, there's a place in Missouri, about 5 hours or so roughly from where I live. It's about an hour south of St. Louis, I would say. It takes me about 5 hours to get there. The place is called the Wildwood Springs Lodge, and the town it's in is Steelville, Missouri. And anyway, I had been there the previous year and saw Tony Rice and Peter Rowan play. They had Billy and Bren Bright at that time playing with them. That was like October of 2002. I didn't go up and talk to Tony that night. In fact, he kind of didn't make himself available, before or after the show that time. Or at least I didn't see him really talking to anybody. But the following October, I got an email or a mailing or something from Wildwood Springs Lodge saying the Tony Rice Unit was going to be there. And they were going to be there 2 nights. They were going to be there on a Friday and a Saturday night. So I was really pumped, and I'd already made plans. I thought I'll take in both nights of the show this time. I'll get a room up there and stay over and see both nights of the show. So that's what I did. But before that time came up, I communicated some with Ronnie Simpkins by email, and I had sent an email maybe a week or two before the actual show come up, and told Ronnie I was looking forward to it and whatnot. And he emailed me back and said, I was going to email you, but you beat me to it. And he told me he kind of had a dilemma going on because, he was with a Seldom Seen at that time, and he was playing an electric upright bass, I think made by Zeta, if I remember correctly. And he didn't want to fly his good acoustic bass, of course, to St. Louis or whatnot, and take a chance on getting it busted up or whatnot. So he asked me if I had one or if I knew anyone that had a acoustic bass that he could borrow for the show. And it just so happens that I did. At the time, I was working for Rainey Recording Studio, and we had a session bass player that come in, and he played electric and upright bass. So I asked him, and he lived in Missouri. So I told him, hey, could Ronnie Simpkins borrow your bass to play with the Tony Rice unit? And he said, sure. Come by and pick it up, bring it back when you're done. So, I did. I made arrangements with him. I went by and got the bass, and he actually went to the Friday night show with me. Ronnie got us both in, of course, for bringing the bass. I think the bass wasn't exactly to Ronnie's exact liking. The action was a little higher, I think, than he liked. But it worked out. Ronnie told me that Tony was real traditional, and he wanted to play an acoustic bass for Tony if he could at all that night, instead of bringing an electric upright to play with him. So it worked out really well. And Tony put on a fabulous show. Of course, he wasn't singing. I think any singing that was done was probably Ricky Simpkins. And I'm not even sure they did any singing that night. In fact, it doesn't really stand out that they did, if they did. But they played a lot of instrumental songs, and Tony even delved into his jazz repertoire with some of his originals. I remember I got to see him play Fish Scale live and Waltz for Indra, beautiful tune there that Tony composed. It was just a wonderful show. And Tony was playing his old 1935 589 57 old Clarence White guitar there. Anyway, after the show was over on the Friday night that I'm talking about, Tony went backstage, and I figured maybe that, he wasn't going to come back out, but he did. He come back out, and of course people immediately started kind of surrounding him and getting pictures taken with him and shaking hands and getting autographs and all that stuff. And he stood there a good hour, I would say at least. And when everybody else had kind of left, me and my friend that had loaned the bass to Ronnie to play in the Tony Rice unit that night, we went over. We were the last ones that went over to Tony, and of course shook hands with him again, and so did my friend. And I think we did mention to Tony that we had brought the bass, for Ronnie to play that night. And Tony was really nice. We didn't say a whole lot to him. I remember kind of gushing to him at that time that that I had bought a Canon F1 camera like him. I knew that's what he used. And we kind of talked a few words about photography. And then I did ask Tony to get a picture with him. And I'm so glad I did now. I'll show it to you here. And according to what I wrote on the back of the picture, of course, this was at Wildwood Springs Lodge in Steelville, Missouri, October the 10th, 2003, at approximately 11 p.m. So, and there's a picture of me and Tony there that evening. So I was really proud that I got to talk to Tony again and actually get a picture with him that time around. And I have to say both my experiences meeting Tony were positive. I didn't get to say a whole lot to him, I didn't linger around him a long time because, you know, he had a lot of he'd already been standing there a long time talking to people, and I knew he was tired. I never did get to talk to Tony again after that. I did see him a couple of more times after that. I saw him the following year, 2004, at the same place, Wildwood Springs Lodge. And I saw him the following year, 2005, at the IBMA convention in Nashville. He came out and did a few songs with a girl he just recorded with, and her name is escaping me right at the moment. Her first name's Donna Hughes. Donna Hughes. He came out and did a few songs with Donna about halfway through her set. But anyway, I know a lot of you are fans of Tony. I continue to be to this day. I think he's one of the greatest acoustic guitarists that's ever lived, possibly ever will live. Anyway, I'd like to hear your experiences meeting Tony. Those of you that were fortunate enough to get to meet Tony and talk to him, what were some of your experiences and thoughts about that? Comment down below and let me know if you would. Anyway, friends, thank you for watching the channel. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe and share these videos if you would, and let folks know what's going on with our channel. And I'll continue to try to bring you some good content on here. And thank you again for watching. Appreciate it so much. Much obliged to you.